Mitzvosecha. Issur Sinas Yisroel, Mitzvas Ahavas Yisroel, the prohibition of hating another Jew and the mitzvah to love another Jew. According to what the Torah says, Sefer Chinuch says that you don't hate your brother in your heart. All negative behaviors come from that. And even if you just behave in an outward manner toward them, there's other prohibitions that are violated through that, so don't do that. Then we have the Derech Mitzvosecha. You're supposed to love your fellow as yourself, and this is love that goes down to the soul level, and through that, all good behaviors towards someone else will come from that. And the convert who went to Hillel, he said, teach me the whole Torah 1 foot, and Hillel says, what is hateful to you, don't do to somebody else. That's the whole Torah, the rest is commentary, go study. The Maamar is going to cover both parts of, first of all, how can we say that's the entire Torah, but also, why was it phrased like this? The first question we have is, how is it that Ahavas Yisroel is considered the entire Torah? That makes sense for every mitzvah that has to do with my behavior towards somebody else, but the mitzvah between me and God, where does that come in? And not just that, we see that before we daven, we're supposed to hareini mekabel, as in you're supposed to take upon yourself the mitzvah of love another Jew, which the Priyas Chaim tells us is actually going to influence the success of your davening, to really take upon yourself love of another Jew. So what's going on here? Because davening is definitely between me and God. We also see that the Arizal used to say the confession prayer, even though the Arizal was a tzaddik. The Arizal wasn't necessarily saying it for himself, he was saying it for the individuals within the collective. And what is that saying? That Adam, the first man, was what we call an neshama klalis. So it's an all-encompassing soul. We all stem from that original soul. It also takes the shape of the man in the sense that our souls then come from different parts, from different limbs of the body. The arm soul and the elbow soul and the feet soul or whatever. So everybody's come from a different part, but ultimately we're all connected in this original man. That's also that we saw that the word of Adam, the name of Adam, when we are acting as we should and acting in a godlike manner, then this name of Adam is Adam al-Elyon, I will be like the one above. Being like the one above in the sense that mimicking, being in godlike in behaviors, but not just that. God calls us his firstborn children, B'ni B'cha Yisrael, the same way that a son takes after his father, so we as the children of God should be taking after God. We are made in his image in that sense. When we behave as we should, Adam becomes Adam al-Elyon, I'm like the one above. Yes, you are taking after your father. And if someone is not like that, God forbid, the word of Adam becomes like Adama, the earth, you are just being like dirt-like. The gematria of Adam is 45, and we correlate this to the dimension of the name of Avaya, that's also 45, the name of Ma. What is it about the name of, there's different names of God and different dimensions. Specifically here we're looking at the name of Avaya, different dimensions within that. So there's actually one dimension that correlates to the world of Tohu, the world that we call, quote unquote, the world of chaos. That's the world where light was too great to be contained, either because it yearned so much to return to its source, or just it couldn't be contained. So there, the attributes were stacked one on top of another. After that world, the world that comes in is called the world of tikkun, the world of fixing an order, and that's that we have the attributes lined up as we see them, the 3 columns of the interrelating column. And that comes about through the name of Ma. So this name of Ma that allows for the interrelation is the one that's related to this name of Adam. That Adam also started off as a wholeness that branches out to other things, but like 2 totally different paths can be brought together in one path. This is the power at play here in our functioning. So everything that Eliyahu had to say, the Pasach Eliyahu, Elijah the prophet, described how the system works. We saw the whole thing from Tanya about how does the soul give life to the body. So on the one hand, the soul is a general light switch and everything in the body is equally alive, but also the soul gives each organ a specific power that correlates to Adam being this neshama klalis, all-encompassing soul. There's one aspect that's just this allness, the wholeness, but then from there also, there's also giving out to the individual kind of idea. In the body, you have the soul that's in the head, and then it gives power to each part of the body, and each part of the body, even though they seem to be separate organs and stuff, they're still all connected to each other. And we see that just in the simple fact that there's veins running through the whole body, that you could take blood from one area of the body and put it into another area of the body, because they're still connected to each other, even though they're also separate organs. They can be separate, but also still connected, which goes back to the idea of the interrelation of different attributes. Ramban talk about the highly, the primordial matter from which everything was created, which again goes to the idea of the wholeness, and then separate things coming out of the wholeness, but everything still being connected to the wholeness. Which also got us to the idea about that just because now we seem to think that we're separate because we all are existing as separate entities, but ultimately, especially in the spiritual sense, we're all still connected to each other. That goes all the way back to the idea of the Arizal saying the confession prayer, because someone like the Arizal, who is like a head soul compared to the rest of the Jewish people, the same way that the soul in the brain still receives messages from each aspect of the body and can interpret what it is, because there's that two-way street there, because it gives it its specific power. The Arizal, being a head kind of soul, can tap into the different organs of the body. And the body here, we're talking about the collective of all the Jewish souls. So we can identify what's going on with each one. And if that's true for the Arizal, that's definitely true for the ultimate source of everybody, which is God on high. V'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, that you should love someone as yourself. We mean that in a literal sense, because that other person is your actual self, because everything is interconnected. So yes, you're your own entity, your own person, but also all the souls are still all connected to each other. The same with the veins are running through the whole body. Going back to, so why do we say Hareini? Why do we have Ahavas Yisroel when we're going to daven to God? Because if someone's going to go and offer themselves up to God, say the word Echad, that everything is a oneness within the world. That could only happen if your soul is healthy, complete soul. The recognition that we're all part of a wholeness and a oneness, that we're all connected and interrelated to each other. Which brings us to a section here from Tractate Brachos. And here it's talking about prayers. So the idea that when a person says Shema, that they're offering themselves before God. Here it's going to speak now about prayers in general. It's coming in the middle of a conversation about prayers. Where are they instituted, how are they instituted, and things like that. The dispute between the rabbis and Rabbi Yehuda with regard to the times beyond which the different prayers may not be recited is rooted in profound disagreement, also manifested in a later Amoraic dispute. So what it's talking about here, that there was a disagreement, we have the 3 prayers that have been instituted. So is there a set time for saying them? And then that all depends on what are they supposed to correlate to. How did we end up with 3 of them to begin with? Shachar, Mincha, Ma'ariv, morning, afternoon, evening services. This is all part of the discussion that's going on there. It was stated, Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina, said, the practice of praying 3 times daily is ancient, albeit not in its present form. Prayers were instituted by the forefathers. So here Rabbi Yossi is saying the format that we have now is a little bit different, but the forefathers are the one who instituted the prayers. However, Yeshua ben Levi said that the prayers were instituted based on the daily offering, sacrifice in the Holy Temple, in the Beis Hamikdash, and the prayers parallel the offerings in terms of both time and characteristics. So he's saying that it's instituted by the forefathers, which would influence our approach. What are the laws about the prayers? Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, no, this is supposed to correlate to the sacrifices brought in the Beis Hamikdash, which would change the approach because there's certain rules about those sacrifices. So do we correlate that then? Do we apply that then to our own prayers? The Gemara comments, it was taught in a Braita as in an earlier teaching in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina, and it was taught in Braita in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Both of these opinions have been taught. The Gemara elaborates, it was taught in Braita in accordance with the opinion of Rabbi Yosef, son of Rabbi Hanina. Avram instituted the morning prayer, as it is stated when Avram came to look at over Sodom the day after he had prayed in its behalf, and Avram rose early in the morning to the place where he had stood before Hashem. There's different verses that they correlate to saying, oh, this is what the prayer that the forefather was doing then. And from the context as well as the language utilized in the verse, the verb standing means nothing other than prayer, as this language used to describe Pinchas' prayer. After the plagues, it is stated, and Pinchas stood up and prayed, and the plague ended. So say, oh look, here's talking about the language of standing, here's talking about the language of standing. That means it's talking about prayer. So that's from Tehillim. Clearly, Avram was accustomed to stand in prayer in the morning, saying that Shachar was instituted because of Avraham. Yitzchak instituted the afternoon prayers. It is stated, and Yitzchak went out to converse lasuach in the field toward evening. Yitzchak lasuach basad lefnas arav. And conversation means nothing other than prayer. As it is stated, a prayer for a poor man when he wraps himself and pours out his speech, sicha before Hashem, Tillim. You guys recognize this verse? We had this in one of the Pesach Maamars where it says the prayer for the poor man wraps himself to pour out his speech before Hashem. That part of his prayer is, please just let me speak to you. I don't want to get distracted by all the other stuff in the world. Like a person going into a palace and there's so much to distract them. So part of the prayer itself is just, please, I got to speak to you. Before it correlated the language of standing, here it's correlating the language of sicha lasuach. It's saying, see, here it's talking about prayer, so here it's also talking about prayer. Obviously, Yitzchak was the first to pray as evening approached at the time of the afternoon prayer. That's the prayer that he instituted. Yaakov instituted the evening prayer, as it is stated, and he encountered the Yivka, the place, and he slept there for the sun had set. Yivka b'makam ve'al and sham. The word encounter, b'giyah, means nothing other than prayer, as it is stated when Hashem spoke to Yirmiyah, and you do not pray on behalf of this nation, and do not raise on their behalf song and prayer, and do not encounter tifka, for I do not hear you. Yaakov prayed during the evening after the sun had set. There are different verses that are used for the patriarchs that they're correlating to later verses that are clearly about prayer, and they're referencing back. See, it's using the same word in regard to the patriarchs. That's when we know that the patriarchs are praying. One way or the other, you have the two opinions about either they were instituted according to the forefathers or was it instituted according to the sacrifices. If saying that they were according to the sacrifices, which kind of the way that we know prayers today, even if it is from the forefathers, part of how we have it now is definitely because of the sacrifices, and we can see from a lot of what the prayers are about, referencing the sacrifices. The daily prayers were instituted in place of the daily sacrifices. Thus, the spiritual service of prayers, they're offering up of one's own self. The whole idea was the sacrifices. You took this animal, and it's supposed to represent this animal materialistic aspect of yourself, and you offer it up to God, as in, let's forego this animalistic drive that we have. We're going to give up this part of ourselves to draw closer, because carbon is from the language of drawing closer, which means that davening replaces that now. I'm coming out to offer myself up to God, as in, let's refine ourselves, get past this materialistic, animalistic aspect of ourselves, become more spiritual, and draw closer to God. A sacrifice, however, must be unblemished. You can't offer up an animal that's got any sort of nicks or cuts in it. It's got to be a perfect animal. A person's physical health is dependent on the soundness of each limb. His spiritual health is dependent on the soundness of each dimension of his soul, including the interrelated parts. Therefore, a lack of unity results in blemishes which can disqualify a sacrifice. So in a physical sense, you have to have a perfect animal to be a perfect representation. For a human, you have a physical aspect and a spiritual aspect. So same way that your physical health is dependent on everything working correctly, speaking to each other, doing what it's supposed to be doing, in a spiritual spiritual sense, you have the same thing. Your spiritual ecological system has to be fully healthy and fully in line. So if you're going to come now to pray to God, you're going to stand before God in prayer, which is like a sacrifice. How are you going to present yourself if you have, quote unquote, a blemish? If a part of you is imperfect? How is this part of you imperfect? Because you have not fully embraced all these aspects of yourself. As in, not just your own self, but the parts of yourself that are interrelated with somebody else. A healthy soul incorporates all other souls, just as an organ is healthy when the veins connecting it to all others are healthy. I'm in perfect health, but just this one particular vein is not functioning so great. No, you're not in perfect health, sorry. We don't work like that. Thus, when a soul is united with all, it can ascend with favor before Hashem at the level of Chachma, which includes all souls as one. This unity results from man loving another with his very body and self. The Mitzvah Ahavas Yisroel is how, in a spiritual sense, we could be completely healthy. To have a fully operating, interrelated system of all the organs, etc. Remember we said we're all coming from a different limb of Adam. If you were going to have, oh no, my entire body is healthy, except not for that arm soul over there. That's not a healthy spiritual body anymore. It's not just that it's not healthy. There's a blemish. And as we've just seen, you can't stand before God to offer as a sacrifice. You can't stand in prayer before God when there's a blemish. You gotta fix it. Pick your elbows. Abba midas badam, Maamar sheli shalach v'shalach sheli, Amar sheli v'shalach shalach, so amid venis v'yesh armim, so amid stum, sheli shalach v'shalach shalach, chassid shalach sheli v'sheli rasha. There are four types of people. One who says what is mine is yours and what is yours is mine. Is a bore, not with an O-R-E, but O-O-R. One who says what is mine, what is yours is yours. This is a median characteristic. Others say this is the character of Sodom. One who says what is mine is yours and what is yours is a chassid. And here it's meaning in the sense of like a pious person. And one who says what is mine and what is yours is mine is a wicked person. Because as we see, the righteous person incorporates this interrelated system in the sense of the full connective sense to the extent of what is mine is yours. So loving somebody else as if they are their own self. Conversely, if man hates another in his heart, pushing away with hate and removing his will from that person, he separates the part of his fellow contained within his soul. This causes a defect and lack in his soul, making him blemished as he severs that part from himself. So when a person treats another person with hatred, that's, by the way, there's nothing to, people say, oh, so that means that if someone does something wrong, I don't have to punish, whatever. It's not the same as punishment and stuff like that. Here we're just talking about some sort of unbridled hatred that a person has towards somebody else, not even specifically hating the evil within them. Person rejecting somebody else just out of a hatred of somebody else is someone who's rejecting a part of themselves, thereby they're severing a part of themselves, thereby they now have a blemish within themselves. Thus he is unable to ascend in favor before Hashem. For the Or Ein Sof, which is the infinite light, so talking about God on the higher level of there, for the Or Ein Sof contains all, including the missing, rejected individual, and will not tolerate him because of this lack of a particular limb within him. So you're going to go before the perfection that contains everything, and you are missing a part of yourself now because you've rejected it out of hatred. And the perfection that contains everything is going to look at you and be like, something's missing. What's missing? Oh, I lost a part. Where'd it go? It fell off. Where'd it go? I rejected it out of hatred. You're going to say that? You're going to try to present that before God Almighty, who includes all and who has made all and is the all-encompassing of all. And then here we have the verses. This is from Parshas Emor. Daber al Lamar ish mizarach l'deresa asher yeva mum loikav lakav lechem elka. Speak to Aaron, saying, any man among your offspring throughout their generations who has a blemish should not come near to offer up his God's food. As in, here's talking about particularly about a Kohen was not allowed to offer a sacrifice if they had a blemish, a mum. They're certain what exactly disqualified that. Kol asher bra mum lo sakrivu ki lo l'ratzon yeh lechem. Any animal that has a blemish you shall not offer up, for it will not be favorable for you. Multiple verses in the Torah saying that which is incomplete cannot come before God. We're talking about here in a spiritual sense. That someone who has severed a part of themselves through hatred is now someone who is a blemished someone, and that person cannot ascend to God in favor. As we saw going all the way back to the Priyat Chaim, that for your prayers to go up in favor before God, you have to have this Mitzvah Ahavas Yisroel. Mitzvah Ahavas Yisroel is saying, I am accepting all parts of myself, even the interrelated parts of myself, thereby you are a complete self. And if a man offers up a peace offering to Hashem for declaring a vow or as a donation from cattle or from the flock to be accepted, it shall be unblemished. It shall not have any defect in it. A person rejecting a part of themselves, severing a part of their soul, this interconnected soul creates a defect within themselves. That which has a blemish, that which has a defect cannot be offered. So this answers the first part of what Hillel was saying. How can you say that this is the entire Torah? We understood the parts between man and man, all the mitzvahs that have to do with man and man. But why are you even saying that this has to do with the mitzvahs between me and God? For example, prayer, which is definitely between me and God. How could Ahavas Yisroel, not loving another person, not rejecting another person, what does that have to do with my prayer to God? Oh, we have a very good example of that. Prayers instead of sacrifices. And as we know, there's rules for sacrifices. That which is imperfect, that which has the blemish, cannot be offered up before God. And a person who makes themselves imperfect through hatred of somebody else, through rejecting somebody else, severs off that part in a spiritual sense of themselves from this all-encompassing soul. They're all interrelated to each other, is somebody who has made themselves a blemished individual. And blemish cannot be offered offered up as a sacrifice before God. So what does this have to do between the mitzvahs between you and God? Why are you saying this is everything? Because this is everything. Recognizing this aspect of Ahavas Yisroel is fully embracing the entire spiritual structure of everything that we are. The entire spiritual sense of what we are. We see what the punchline of everything is. What's going on in the spiritual sense of Ahavas Yisroel is that it's a completeness of embracing everybody. There's a wholeness that comes from it because we are interrelated. So when we recognize that and embrace that, you're recognizing in large measure what's going on here with all the Torah stuff versus a rejection of it. Rejection of somebody else is severing a part of what all this is. Answer the first part of how can Hillel say that this is the whole Torah, and the rest go study it.